Well, welcome everybody to the first webinar of 2019 for the Emergency Management Webinar Series. My name is Ryan Landcloss. I'll be your host today, and we're going to be talking about collaboration for increasing resilience and specifically looking at distributed GIS today with ArcGIS. I'm excited to have Ed Karubas with us today. Many of you may have heard Ed speak at many of our events before. He's one of my partners on the public safety team and leads our global practice for services in public safety and also in health. And so I'm excited to have Ed's expertise today talking about organizations that have implemented distributed GIS and this collaboration tool that we're going to be talking about. And so that's our agenda, is really to level set a bit of the importance of WebGIS that really delivers the ability to do distributed collaboration. We'll certainly level set on what distributed collaboration is for those that term may be new. We'll talk about how you can implement this inside of your own organization or from partner to partner inside of organizations today. A bit of housekeeping as always. So you are all in listen only mode. So if you do have questions throughout the webinar, just please use the chat window to ask questions. We'll try to answer as many of those as we can today on the webinar. If we don't get to your question, know that we certainly will follow up after this with a phone call or an email to answer your question in more detail. So use the chat window along the way. Feel free at any time to ask questions. We'll respond appropriately. We are recording the webinar today as always, and that will be posted online after the webinar is done. You can get to that going back to the same place where you registered for the webinar on the Esri.com website. And you will get an email after this for those that have registered with links to follow up, some additional resources about distributed GIS and the collaboration aspects that we'll talk about, some frequently asked questions that might help you kind of figure out how to implement this for your organization, but also links back to find the recording of this webinar today. So just a bit of context, why we wanted to set this as our first theme for 2019 and really, putting this conversation out there and driving forward. And, as we looked back at 2018, as always, I think many of us kind of reflect back on the year that we've had and where we need to go, is that, we see around us collectively that the world is changing at an astronomical pace, and that is digital transformation. That is, the wiring up of sensors from the Internet of Things. It is truly the movement of people around our planet into more urban environments, into environments that are actually more exposed to different hazards and ultimately more risk as they move into those areas. And that all of those things around us have really put us at a new place that we've never been before. And this slide actually came from the user conference in 2018 in Jack's plenary, when he was talking about the idea that all of these things around us, this urbanization, this population move, the amount of drought that we see coming in the Western US that's leading to larger and more catastrophic wildland fires, all of that has really put us at this new place where we need to rely on each other. We need better understanding of these elements, but ultimately we need each other to do more. And that is, how do we collaborate together to truly drive action and make a difference in our world? And so I was reading back, and we had this slide that we've used a couple of times in 2018. And it was funny, we looked at the numbers, the dollar numbers, if you will, around catastrophic events globally. And I just read this article over the break for the holidays, and it was that, for the fact that around us, right, all these events that many of you have probably lived through in 2018, that you're preparing for 2019, were the costliest ever on record. So this cost of natural disasters here, about $155 billion in 2018. And those included things like Hurricane Michael and Florence in the US. It was the volcano eruption in Hawaii, for example, but also typhoons in the APAC region and so forth. And all we know that those things are just going to continue to increase in veracity and the cost that come with those and the complexity that ultimately they bring to us. And again, that kind of drives back to the point of, how do we do more with less? How do we lean on our partners to do more and ultimately have each other's back when we need it during one of these difficult times? And so two of the most important elements of this idea of being more resilient, to be able to take the punch of one of these massive events coming into our backyard, is partnerships. So we're going to talk a lot about that and what that means from a technology perspective. And, for those that work in public safety, partnerships are key, right? We know from mutual aid perspective in the US, how do we call on our neighbors to deliver resources and personnel to support us in time of need? So partnerships are key. And I would say the second thing that's so important to this element of resilience is trust. That means, how do we trust our neighbors to step in and help us, and how do we know that they're going to have our back? And so I think that both of those elements of resilience, both the idea of developing partnerships and the element of trust that allow us to collaborate in an effective way, are just as important as they are for day-to-day things and moving apparatus and personnel as they are in the technology world of GIS. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'd like to turn it over to Ed to kind of start the conversation. Ed's going to talk a little bit about the importance of WebGIS and really setting the context, the foundation that allows us to get to distributed collaboration. And then we'll kind of move to the next phase, which is talking about that collaboration and how to do that. So with that, Ed, the floor is all yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us here today. WebGIS is what makes collaboration possible, and so I thought I would begin by spending a few moments just sharing with all of you the importance of WebGIS and how that relates to collaboration. So many of you utilize ArcGIS today for your important work, and it provides a framework and a process for your work to be done that includes managing your data and integrating different business systems, mapping and visualizing that information, being able to utilize the science of where for analysis, modeling, planning. This might be disaster planning or special event planning, decision making, and ultimately action. We like to say that understanding precedes action. This ArcGIS provides that framework to be able to understand so that you can make better decisions. So underneath all of that, what drives WebGIS as a modern architecture is this concept of web services, web maps, and apps. Web services utilizes REST protocols to be able to take your data, host it, serve it out as a service that can be consumed within your organization. Web maps is this ability to orchestrate web services. A web service can be used, a layer of data mashed together can be used in a series of different web maps. And then web maps can be shared across multiple apps, whether they're mobile apps for field data collection or bringing those data together for dashboards and for situational awareness viewing, all of that. So think of it as these three tiers of serving your data as services, orchestrating those services for maps in web maps for particular purposes, and then providing that functionality in the series of apps. And many of you are doing this today, and you're doing this today within your portal, your organizational portals, and you can do this where you can create your own and just share it yourself, an individual, or through a group. You can share it with a team or your entire department, or throughout an organization, or share with the community. Share this content out, these information products out publicly, engaging everyone. What we're going to talk about today is where we're moving to that next pattern of distributed and interconnected, trusted sharing between organizations. So web maps, again, provide this common language across multiple apps for sharing important information for decision making and problem solving across organizations and across communities, including the public safety community. And this opens up a whole range of things which really make this a very compelling approach, right? It's easy, it's accessible, it's interconnected. It includes field apps and story maps, solution apps, online content. All of this is able to be served out to support the mission. And underneath all of that, being fueled by powerful data analytics. And so what we're really seeing is WebGIS driving a digital transformation, helping you re-envision your workflow from where perhaps today you're doing things sequentially. And then you get to a certain point, then you hand off to another part of your organization or toward another organization where they pick it up and then they move from there. And what collaboration capabilities are now providing in the platform is simultaneous integrated operations. That as you're working on something, another partner in the EM community sees and has access to what you're working on and can build on that, contribute to it. You can see how that really provides just a fundamental change to how we approach and respond to emergencies, to our important work. Very powerful. So with that, I think Ryan, maybe you want to run a full question here.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Ed. So, I think that's a great kind of primer, like why it's so important to be thinking about collaboration. What we're talking about is different than before, right? So moving from sequential applications to integrated business, right, where we're relying on each other to fulfill the need of data. And so this term, though, that we're talking about, distributed collaboration, may be new. And so we're going to talk about what that means in more detail, as Ed just kind of showed you this transformation, this digital transformation from where we used to be to where we are today. And so before we do that, we wanted to kind of level set and hear from you. So if you could take a moment, so let us know if you're currently using distributed collaboration. And that could be easy, yes, no, or it's okay if you say, I'm not even sure what that means at this point. I'm here to learn what distributed collaboration is all about. So if you would, just take a moment, select the one that best applies to your organization, and then we'll kind of tailor the message going forward and figure out where we need to start the conversation on distributed collaboration. So I'll give you just a second to finish out the poll, if you would, please. All right, looks like people are selecting in. Let's take a look at the results. All right, perfect. So this is actually really good. So about 36% of you saying, yes, we're using distributed collaboration today, so that's great. I hope that you will pick up some new tips and tricks, see where we're headed as a technology of ArcGIS. For those of you that are not, and those that are not sure what it means at this point, so the majority of you we're on the webinar today, we'll certainly give you an introduction to what distributed GIS and collaboration is all about, how to implement that inside the organization, and some tips and tricks to do that in a trusted environment so that you truly understand who and what you're sharing with in a very kind of, again, trusted way. So with that, Ed, that'll kind of turn it back to you. So we'll know that about 65% of the folks here, this term is new. So we'll kind of start there and move forward. Thanks, Ed.
All right, thank you, Ryan. That's great feedback. Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to hear that a third of you are already using distributed collaboration, and I hope after this webinar we have opportunities to connect and understand at a deeper level your successes and also your challenges as you use it. I'm hoping today to level set, provide for those of you who are already using distributed collaborations, as Ryan mentioned, some additional information, tips and tricks, resources, and then for those of you who are just getting to an understanding of it, to provide that baseline so that perhaps within your own organizations and between organizations, which is what it's all about, you'll be able to begin utilizing this important functionality as well. So distributed collaboration, what is it at the highest level? It establishes a trusted environment among participants. You have that today within your own organizations. If you're using Portal, ArcGIS Portal, or ArcGIS Online organization accounts, this is really about trusted environments among participants in a network of organizations. Providing insight, visibility, and accessibility to content. And with this concept of network of organizations moving for the first time beyond your organizational boundaries, so that you're now sharing content with other organizations in this trusted framework. And by doing that allows users to work toward goals, initiatives, and projects together. So let's talk about some of the common patterns. And you could think of it in to start with in two broad categories: one-to-one and between many. And one-to-one collaboration can occur between two ArcGIS enterprise portals, or it can occur between an ArcGIS enterprise portal and an ArcGIS Online organization. ArcGIS Online is, of course, Esri's software as a service offering. ArcGIS Enterprise is a portal that you might be hosting on premises, or you may be hosting it up in the cloud. So that's that one-to-one. Also, off all the way to the left of this slide, I wanted to also note that even though not technically part of distributed collaboration, there's also this ability between two ArcGIS Online organizations to set up a private group share, where you invite members of an organization or multiple organizations to your organization for sharing content. So we're now today spending most of this discussion talking about capabilities that have moved beyond that ArcGIS Online to ArcGIS Online private group share into these additional patterns of use. Those include beyond one-to-one, between many, and it might be enterprise to enterprise, where there are multiple ArcGIS enterprise portals collaborating and sharing information with a central portal, or could be a multiple ArcGIS enterprise organizations collaborating with an ArcGIS Online organization. So let's talk about just some common use cases. Why would we want to do this? So one example might be that you have an ArcGIS Online enterprise portal that your organization uses today. You're securely sharing content, but you also want to start to share content with your constituents, with the public. And you may want to do that through an ArcGIS Online organization. And so one way to set up and utilize collaboration, distributed collaboration, is to keep data in sync between your ArcGIS Enterprise portal and with an ArcGIS Online org. This might be a hub, for those of you who are familiar with the ArcGIS Hub product, to create community-based initiatives and sharing apps and content, open data. I mean, there's a range of different opportunities where you'd want to establish a collaboration between your enterprise portal and an ArcGIS Online organization. Another example would be, and this is a perfect example for public safety response organizations, it might be a special event that you're planning, and as your law enforcement agency is in coordination with your fire agency, Department of Transportation, or this might be a regional disaster response where folks are coordinating around damage assessment or road closures or sharing the latest imagery. In these scenarios, you're creating trusted collaborations between multiple ArcGIS enterprise organizations and sharing that content. And then everyone has access to the most current data sets through that collaboration. So why is this important for regional response? I started here at Esri in 2005, and about 2 months into beginning my time at Esri, Hurricane Katrina happened, and collaboration capabilities didn't exist. In fact, iPhones didn't exist when Hurricane Katrina happened. And the way data, for many of you who have been involved in a regional coordinated response, you understand the challenges. In Hurricane Katrina, it was literally, we needed to understand, folks needed to understand parcel information across the regions to be able to conduct damage assessment and coordinate on the latest available imagery and road data and all of that. And in the absence of this kind of technology, we call it sneaker netting, right? So what happened was folks would FTP their data to a FTP server, and then that would get downloaded off onto a data brick, and that would be put onto a four-wheel drive vehicle and then moved out to the JFO. And then, of course, as soon as that happened, it was out of date, right? So and then in all of that, knowing that once you've shared those data, do you really, you don't have kind of control over kind of the content and managing it. And so just we've come a long way. We've come quite a long way since those days, and where we are today, we've seen this technology evolve quite a bit just in our last several releases. I talked about ArcGIS Online, organization to organization group sharing. At 10.5, at ArcGIS 10.5, we began to share by reference data between two enterprise, ArcGIS enterprise portals. 10.5.1 started to be able to support the ability to share between an ArcGIS Online organization and ArcGIS Enterprise. And at 10.6, things really started to take off, right? Where we can now share feature layers as copies, and also control and manage delete policies, so that once you share synchronized copy, and I'll get into some of that, some of those details in a moment, but also being able to manage when you delete content from a sharing organization, that also keeps that in sync at the client. And then at 10.6.1, we're now able to share web apps. So beyond just sharing web maps and data, to being able to actually share web apps, many web apps as copies at 10.6.1. And I'll drill into that in a few minutes here. So with that, that's what distributed collaboration is. I want to kind of go into more detail at this point about implementing. How do we implement distributed collaboration? And I'm going to start with some key concepts so that everyone becomes familiar with them. The first is this concept of a host and a guest. So in a distributed collaboration, every distributed collaboration needs a host, and then there are guests, and it could be one or more guests to that collaboration. So what's the difference between the two? Well, a host initiates the collaboration and invites the guests. And then the host decides if their feature services, their data served out as feature services, are sent as a reference or as a copy. And as a reference means that you're connecting to the link, but the data aren't moving, and in the copy, the data are actually moving, and then there's synchronization. And then the host also configures the guest access mode. So as a guest, will a guest be able to send data, receive and content, send or receive, or send and or receive, right? So any of those options, but those options are established by the host. So what about a guest? Well, a guest accepts the invitation. The guest decides if their feature services are sent as reference or as copies, right? So same as the host, for the data services that the guest is sharing, are they going to provide a link to it, or are they going to have data movement? And then if data are being moved in either direction, the guest sets the synchronization interval. And I'll cover that in a moment. So how does this work? So just to run through the steps, a host creates a collaboration and invites a guest. And in this case, I'm saying an ArcGIS Online organization as a host and an ArcGIS Enterprise as a guest. So the host creates the collaboration and invites a guest. They download an invitation file and they send that to the guest. The guest administrator receives and downloads the invitation and transfers their response file to the host. And the host accepts the response, and trust is established between both parties. So this is a good place to point out that in an ArcGIS Online to ArcGIS Online shared group, you're inviting members. But in the case of a distributed collaboration, trust is being established between the administrators of two organizations. So that's the difference. So if you can see in this example I just provided, the host is not inviting individual members. They are inviting an organization, and then it establishes trust between the two administrators, and then that guest administrator then will control who in their organization has access to the collaboration. And we can come back around and cover that in more detail later. So in sum, that provides, this is the framework for a trusted collaboration between two organizations. So a couple of key concepts that I want to go through. First is collaboration. So collaboration is this framework I just described, initiated by a host. That sets the relationship, the trusted relationship between two or more organizations. Within a collaboration, there's a concept called workspaces, and there can be multiple workspaces. And a workspace is associated with a particular project or topic or any organizing principle. In the case of emergency management, this might be a disaster response, right? It might be Hurricane X, right? Pick your hurricane. And then within that workspace, there are groups. And the host and each guest link groups to the workspace. And so one group might be around damage assessment, or another group might be around transportation. It could be ESFs, community lifelines. It could be a group around sharing of imagery, but all associated with a particular workspace, which, as I mentioned, in this scenario would be around a disaster response. So I talked about reference, sharing data by reference and by copies. Just wanted to cover that off again, just to make sure I covered it correctly and completely. So in the case of sharing a feature service as a reference, it's live access to an owner's items. So, and it could be in either direction. So either a host or a guest serves up a feature service. The source edits to the layer are available immediately. But you're connected to a link, and so the data actually continue to sit where the owner is serving it out. The other scenario is a feature service shared as copy. In that case, a copy of the data is shared, and then a new hosted feature service is set up in the recipient portal. And that happens automatically as part of that sharing method. And then as part of that, source edits are then synchronized, and they're synchronized one way to recipients. And so by that, and this is an important point, is that the owner will always overwrite synchronizations in a copy. And so you have to be thinking about the trade-offs between sharing as a reference or as copies, depending on what the workflow is. Whether you want to have edits from multiple collaborators or whether you're controlling it from a single source. And then there's a synchronization that's established, and that's based upon the guest who makes the determination of the selected interval. So again, just to review that, one concept is immediate sharing. Any new content shared with a group is sent to participants immediately, or within the collaboration capabilities in your organizational portal, you can set an interval, and then based upon that interval, edits will be made and shared as edits made to feature services that are shared as copies will be synced on that interval. So the last item I want to cover is, so what type of items can be shared? And there are quite a few flat files, everything from CSVs or Excel files, even Word documents. Those can all be shared through a collaboration. Shape files, tile packages, map packages, web seams for 3D support. I talked about hosted feature layers as copy or reference. And then new at 10.6.1, and this is really exciting, is that we're now supporting web apps. And those web apps include configurable application templates like story maps or crowdsource manager, crowdsourcing apps, and other crowdsourcing apps or public information apps are examples of this. Also, web app builder apps can be shared as well. And other apps, web apps that are referenced by a URL, even if they're not copied, they can still be referenced. So as you can see, a whole host of items that can be shared, really kind of powering collaboration based upon workflows of different types. So I want to just come back again. I mentioned a few times sharing ArcGIS Online group content. This sits outside of, or as a precursor, I would say, to the capabilities we're discussing around distributed collaboration. But this capability still exists, and so and is still really valuable. And so I wanted to spend a moment just highlighting a couple of key points around this. So 2 or more ArcGIS Online organizations today can share content in a group simply by inviting members. So in this case, again, it's the trust relationship is not between 2 administrators, but you do have to invite individual members to your group. But you're able to invite more than one organization too. So you can set up a group in your ArcGIS Online organization. You can invite members into that group. 2 things, though, important. One is, and this is a copy of my profile, the individual who you're inviting into an ArcGIS Online group, their profile has to be set to everyone public. In other words, my ID needs to be discoverable in ArcGIS Online. That doesn't mean that it's public access, but my ID needs to be discoverable in order to be invited into a private group share in ArcGIS Online organization. And then also at the admin level in that organization that you're inviting members from, they have to be able to have the setting checked to join external groups. So what we found is that when organizations try to set up ArcGIS Online group content sharing in this manner, and they run into difficulties, it's typically around these two areas where there's a potential issue, right? That the privileges aren't set to join external groups, and their account is not discoverable. So again, I wanted to cover off on this component because it's probably likely that many of you who are starting to exchange content, share content between your organizations, many of you might be utilizing ArcGIS Online to ArcGIS Online group content sharing. So in terms of distributed collaboration, similarly within the organization, this can be set up. So whether you're in ArcGIS Enterprise, which is the example I have here, or an ArcGIS Online organization, you just go to the organization tab, you look for collaborations, and then from here, this is where you start the process that I described earlier of creating a collaboration. And this is also where you can go in and accept an invitation. So this capability is available from within your organization tab in Portal, or you can automate a process utilizing ArcGIS API for Python. So you may want to use this if you're trying to streamline a workflow, if there's a very large collaboration, for example, that you're trying to create, or you're trying to be more targeted, you can do this just by automating with Python some of the steps. Either way is supported. So once you've created that collaboration and it's been accepted, from that point, sharing is no different than sharing within your own organization today. You just create an item and you share it to the group, and that group is linked to the workspace. And so from a collaborator's point of view, it doesn't look any different. So in a collaboration, again, this is a key distinction between ArcGIS Online group sharing and a distributed collaboration. In a distributed collaboration, you're accessing items and content from within your own organization, and it just looks like another group. And that group happens to be linked to the workspace. And so think of this as, for you science fiction fans, think of this as creating a wormhole between two dimensions, right? So you have two organizations, they're sharing content, but from each of those organizations, it appears as if it's just another group and content within their own organization. And then once you are there, you can then use those items, again, because you're in, because it, from your perspective in a collaboration, it just looks like your own content. You can use it just like you use any other content within your organizational home. So here are just some examples of maps and apps that can be shared. And using that again for visualization, using it for analysis, etc. So I covered a lot of ground pretty quickly. At this point, maybe Ryan, I'll hand off back to you, and maybe we can take some questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ed. So lots of good questions have been coming in as we've been discussing today, hopefully getting most of your questions answered. I know we're still in the process of answering a few of those that have come in through the chat window. But Ed, I do have a couple of things that got teed up that I think are really applicable broadly to the group here. So perhaps we could just kind of step through a few of those really quick together on that.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So the first one that came up I thought was really good. So the question is really around, again, looking at collaboration. So what if organizations that are participating in a collaboration are at different versions of ArcGIS Enterprise? So I know you kind of talked in one of your slides about the evolution of this distributed collaboration from 10.5 to where we are now at 10.6.1. So how do we address that for different versions of folks that may be on the phone that want to collaborate with ArcGIS Enterprise?
Yeah, that's a great question and an important one because there are impacts if in functionality that's available if organizations are operating at different versions of ArcGIS Enterprise. As I mentioned, this functionality has been released over the past several years as we moved from sharing by reference to sharing by copy to a 10.6.1 sharing web apps. My recommendation, or Esri's recommendation, is that to get the best out of the current available functionality, that all participating organizations ideally should be at version 10.6 or 10.6.1 to take advantage, mostly of that sharing by copy and sync, which is a really valuable capability.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Ed. And so the next one that came up, I think, is a good question as well, is around the idea of trust and security itself. And so the question was around, so how do I ensure that those people that I've invited into this collaboration are trusted, right? So do you have kind of thoughts about that, Ed, in terms of, you kind of showed group-to-group sharing as kind of one way that I think people are familiar with sharing content, but what we're talking about is a deeper, that you called it the wormhole, right, between two different organizations truly collaborating through a shared group that looks and acts as if it's their own. So can you maybe speak to how you ensure that those invited users are trusted? Any ideas around that?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. The challenge in ArcGIS Online group sharing is you're inviting individual members, and how, as a host, inviting members into your organization, how do you know that that ID is, that user and that user ID is to be trusted? You're going to work through the administrator or through someone who you trust, who says in turn that those individuals, those are the IDs and those are the individuals that you should invite. Distributed collaboration simplifies that process because it doesn't require a host to establish trust at the individual member level. It's still, you always have to trust someone, right? So it's about administrator to administrator trust. And once you establish that, then the administrator of the guest organization controls who has access to it. So you establish trust with a single entity, and then in turn, that entity then manages the user accounts. So that streamlines it. It makes it, from an accountability perspective, it just makes it more direct in terms of establishing the trust relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's, goes back to the whole point where you kind of set the foundation. I think you said it well, right? So between organizations, right, this is about creating that trusted relationship, organization to organization, right? We are working together collaboratively on a problem, whether that's, as you gave us examples, damage assessment, or, we're going to share content like imagery post-disaster or pre-disaster even. So you've already kind of established that governance, right, that our organizations trust each other. And so we're going to say whoever then is within that organization has access, and certainly you can control that at another level down. But it is about kind of setting the governance early on to say, if it's, for example, in a city, these departments are going to agree to collaborate and share. The governance allows us then to do that, and then we're just setting the wormhole in place so that people can do that seamlessly. And that, I think, the same governance policy would exist if you're going kind of regionally, maybe counties working up to a state or states working to the federal level as well. But it is truly about establishing that administrator to administrator level and the governance in place to do that, and then just allowing that to then percolate all the content into those organizations in real time.
Yeah, agreed.
Somebody asked a question. You kind of highlighted a bit on the end of showing users head, but is there a way to automate some of this invitation process for collaboration? I could certainly see how people that have more advanced, scripting skills, maybe some custom examples might want to do that. So I guess maybe this is an easy question, but do you have suggestions on how to automate that invitation process for collaboration?
Yeah, we are the ArcGIS, through the ArcGIS API. All of that is available to an administrator, and so if it's a single collaboration between two organizations, it's probably easier just to use the capabilities as I kind of described earlier. Just go into the organization tab and set up a collaboration, send the invitation file, receive it. But you may, especially if it's a large-scale event, just to save time and effort, you do need to have some scripting skills in order to do it, but you will be able to kind of automate that process working with other administrators of those of the guests that you're kind of collaborating with to set that up more quickly, and not just the collaboration, but the workspaces and the groups. So that's where there's some time needed. And so another way that folks use that is if you know that when you set up a collaboration, it's going to be around, for example, a wildfire event, and you're going to have the same workspaces and the same groups. That's another great opportunity to use Python scripting in the API for some automation, just to streamline the time it takes to get everything set up.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ed. We just had a question come in I thought was a good question, I think, collaboratively for folks. And the question was around, for the items that we're sharing amongst organizations through this collaboration, can we brand them as our own, right? So, for example, if, a city had, their logo and their name on an application, they're collaborating and sharing with a partner city, would that partner city see that branded application as, the city A? And so I guess the easy answer is that yes. I mean, certainly the things that you as organizations create and share through this collaborative effort can still be branded as your organization, your authoritative content. whether that's through the reference or the copy, right? They're going to certainly see your name, logo, and everything else associated with it. So nothing changes for those that are familiar with sharing content within groups. You still carry your brand forward and kind of keep your authoritative voice through that. So just want to kind of touch on that one quickly.
Yeah, certainly by reference and also by copy. So when it copies over, it also copies over and retains the brand of the sending organization.
Yeah, perfect. This is a good question. I don't know the answer to this one. Maybe you do, and if not, we will follow up. But is there an audit trail for those elements that are viewing? I know certainly on the editing function, we can certainly track editor, last edits to organization content. But any types of an audit trail or just ways that we can track access when you do collaboration amongst items?
Yeah, there is. But I think that, and then when I say there is, just because I know that there's audit capability in ArcGIS Enterprise, but it is, I think we do need to follow up on that just to understand the particulars.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. That's a great question. So for the person that asked that, we'll certainly follow up on that. And there were a couple of questions, I think, about coming back. We touched on versions of ArcGIS Enterprise that needed, but there's a couple of questions here maybe about the types of I guess items inside, not just items, trying to look at Esri technology that play a part in this. So number one, I guess we'll just kind of hit the first question that came up, which was, can an ArcGIS Enterprise collaborate with more than one ArcGIS Online organization? So me as an enterprise user, can I push things out to multiple ArcGIS Online organizations? So I want to start there, Ed, and maybe we can hit a few of these others that are similar in thought around that.
Yeah, that is currently a limitation. In a collaboration, an ArcGIS Enterprise can only collaborate with one. An ArcGIS Enterprise can only collaborate with one ArcGIS Online organization.
Okay.
There are ways to, for lack of a better term, daisy chain the relationships in order to kind of work around some of that. If the individual or organization asking that question want to have a follow-up conversation, I'd be happy to spend some time understanding the workflow and kind of walking through some of those. It's a deeper conversation, but at the highest level, the current limitation is that in a collaboration, there can be multiple ArcGIS Enterprise portals collaborating, but in that collaboration, only one ArcGIS Online organization.
Excellent. And then some people had some questions about data, so where it resides. So for example, the first question was, can I copy data from ArcGIS Online back to an enterprise geodatabase and maybe an ArcGIS Enterprise? And then conversely, can I copy data from an enterprise geodatabase up to ArcGIS Online? So you want to maybe touch on data storage, Ed, and copying and syncing between geodatabases specifically?
Sure. Yeah. So you can copy data from an enterprise geodatabase to ArcGIS Online. So if that enterprise geodatabase is registered to a federated server in ArcGIS Enterprise, then that data can be used as a source layer to collaborate between enterprise and ArcGIS Online. The converse, though, is not supported, though, which is can you copy data from ArcGIS Online into an enterprise geodatabase? And so currently no destination layers within a collaboration must be hosted layers from ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. So you can copy data from an enterprise geodatabase to ArcGIS Online, but not the reverse, from ArcGIS Online to the enterprise geodatabase currently.
Excellent. All right, and maybe the last question we'll take here before we start to close out. So the question here is, for those that don't have ArcGIS Enterprise but are solely using ArcGIS Online today, we've had a couple of questions about that. You speak again just at a high level, ArcGIS Online to ArcGIS Online, the protocols and the way to think about collaboration between organizations, not using ArcGIS Enterprise, but truly using ArcGIS Online organizations and collaborating together.
Yeah, the way to do that today is with group sharing, private group sharing, and there are ways to do that in combination by introducing an ArcGIS Enterprise organizational portal into the architecture. It kind of expands beyond the group share capabilities, private group share capabilities that some folks might be doing today. Strictly speaking, in an ArcGIS Online to ArcGIS Online setup, the way that you would collaborate is through the private group share. But if you created a ArcGIS Enterprise portal, you could use that then to establish workflows that offer additional collaboration, using that ArcGIS Enterprise as a linchpin, if you will, between the two. Again, that's probably not enough time to cover that in detail on this call, but
yeah, certainly.
Yeah, good question.
That's great.
Follow up.
Good. Well, thanks, Ed, for that. So let's just kind of take a moment here to kind of summarize a few of the things we've talked about, and I think why this is so exciting for us here at Esri, but I think hopefully you're getting a sense of it, is that, what we're thinking about and what we are seeing coming next is this massive transformation, right? This idea that we can support each other in a new way of collaborating dynamically, right? Not sequentially, but dynamically working interconnected as organizations around certain problems or initiatives. And doing that at scale. And so I think truly for us to be able to respond to these events, to get more resilience built at the local level all the way up to the national level, we need to figure out a way to do this better. And I think, the theme that we've heard, and I think a common quote that comes out, that we collaborate at the speed of trust. And so as organizations start to look to your partners and set up those data sharing agreements and set up those mutual aid agreements and the like, consider how this technology can help you collaborate more seamlessly, right? To integrate data, to integrate applications, to work together to solve complex problems in a much more kind of streamlined and focused way. I think we're at a tipping point of this happening. We're starting to see organizations take this on today. We saw a third of you today, which is amazing, that you're starting to look at distributed collaboration. But I suspect in 2019 that we are truly going to start to see the development of this public safety geospatial cloud come to fruition. And that is all of you working together to support each other in time of need. And so I'm excited to see where you go as organizations. We'd love to hear from you as you kind of work through this. There are a lot of resources. There are a lot of questions that came in today, and I hope that this was just the intro, right? We've got an hour to kind of wet your whistle, so to speak, on distributed collaboration. So I want to leave you with some additional resources today, and you will certainly get this in an email following up. But number one, sharing content privately between ArcGIS Aligned organizations. There's a great post on that. The short link you see, the bit.ly/sharing privately, will take you to a blog that'll talk in detail about how you do that today and what that really means. So it's a great primer, a great starting point for sharing privately between organizations. And then conversely, Ed did a great job today of setting the floor and the foundation around what distributed collaboration is, the ways in which you can go about collaborating together. And so there's another great post in the help. And so this bit.ly link, distributed collaboration, will take you to that post where you can certainly look at more details at some of the technical documentation about how to do that, some of the pitfalls and things to look out for as you go forward. And know that you can certainly reach out to us for assistance in having that conversation. But I think those first two are great starting points of just understanding how to do it, technically how to do it in the second link. And then there's certainly a whole host of frequently asked questions that we've collected and our product team has put together. And so the last link that you'll find on the screen, so the bit.ly/distributed collaboration facts, will take you to just that, this frequently asked questions list, where you'll find a whole host of these that may answer some of your questions you've currently got. And then conversely, for those of you that didn't get a chance to answer your questions today on the webinar through the chat window or through just our conversations, we will certainly follow up. So look forward to an outreach from us back to you for that. And at this point, if you have additional questions, go ahead and chat those in the window. We'll make sure that we capture those for today, and we will use those to follow up with you in the coming week to make sure that your questions are answered and pointed in the right direction going forward. So I mentioned this is our first webinar for 2019. This really is the foundation, right? This is our big vision for 2019, that we are starting to work together as a community in this new normal to build this resilience. And so you're going to hear a lot more about building this public safety geospatial cloud together and how we do that. And we have a ton of upcoming events where you can learn more about it, get hands-on. You can visit with our team about how to do this, both technically and just kind of organizationally from a governance perspective. We have our Federal GIS conference is the next thing coming up at the end of January, the 29th and 30th in Washington, D.C. A couple of the milestones that are really important looking ahead to July. So our National Security and Public Safety Summit at the Esri User Conference will be July 7th through the 10th, right on the front end of the user conference, which continues through the 12th of that week in July. That is the time you're going to hear about it. Our theme for this year is collaboration in the new normal. You're going to get a much deeper dive. You're going to see how other organizations are doing this in real time. You're going to see how the technology is evolving and be able to play with that in detail. So I'd really encourage you guys to be there. Register today to do that. It's open for registration. For that. And certainly we want to hear from you as well. So if you have a story that you'd like to tell at one of these events, we certainly want to hear from you and figure out ways that we can promote your good work out there to the community as we start to build this collective framework, this collective fabric, if you will, of organizations sharing and collaborating. And with that, I'd just say thanks for joining today in January. I hope you all have a great 2019. I hope you had a great holiday season. Our next webinar for the Emergency Management Seminar Series will be up on April 4th. 2019, so we'll look forward to seeing you there in April. You will get emails from us over the next couple of weeks coming out. All of our other public safety webinar series will be continuing in 2019 on a quarterly basis for each of the segments. So if you're interested in law enforcement or fire rescue, EMS, or computer-aided dispatch and the like, know that we have a number of those webinars ongoing through 2019. You'll continue to get those, and feel free to register. We will record all of those and post them online, and certainly, again, you will get this recording when we are done today with a link to those resources that we just referenced for your quick use at that point. With that, I would say thanks to Ed for taking time today to do that. Thanks to all of you for attending and for your great questions today. This was an interesting webinar. I'm excited about where we're headed as a company, but also more importantly, where you're headed as a community. So let us know how we can help you in that initiative to collaborate better in this new normal for 2019. So with that, thanks for joining, and we'll see you in April, everyone.